Okay, so last week we did a bouncing ball. This week we're gonna continue that whole bouncing ball concept. Just to make sure you guys know where how we're doing things and then get used to the tools again. I know that Christmas break kind of took y'all out of the thing. So if y'all would join me real quick, go ahead and grab a sheet of paper or something to write with and get close to the TV because we got all these little sub menus floating everywhere. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So join me when y'all can. Again, remember today we're gonna be turning in the notes from last week and this week, and so that's gonna be a test grade. Please be sure to put that in. Or I'm gonna go ahead and get started by creating a ball again. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do kind of the same concept we've been doing, right? We've been doing the bouncing ball, so we've done the bouncing ball in place, and then we did a leap forward. Now, what I want you to do, and we're gonna have a couple of days to work on this, is leap forward 3 times, okay? Or just to make sure that we know how to move in a 3D environment, in a 3D space. We get used to the whole concept of walking in place type of thing with animation walk cycles, right? And so we just want to progress on the concept of moving in 3D virtual space and actually using some of these like translate z-axis, translate x-axis type of thing. So I'm gonna go ahead, I've created a ball and I'm gonna move to the side, and again I'm gonna make this ball's pivot point to the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click D to change the pivot point. That's the point that's gonna move in any direction. So if I move it from right here, notice how the center of the ball is literally right in the center of it, right? But if I press D and then I click V, V is gonna snap the vertex or the vertice of the pivot point down to another pivot, down to the vertex of the bottom of the ball. I let go, right? Notice if I start rotating here, the pivot point, it's rotating from the bottom of the ball. That's what I want to do because that's going to be the center of gravity from the ball itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also I'm going to X snap this onto the line. So I'm pressing X and it's going to snap it onto the grid. I want it to be at 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up. Notice this right here, this translate white. We talked this concept of earlier last week where we wanted to have clean numbers, so I have a default to come back to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to freeze my transformations or freeze everything in here. So I'm going to go to top and I'm going to hit modify and then freeze. When I do that, notice how my translate Y is going to be completely 0. So I have a clean slate right here to begin from. So if I come back to my 3D virtual viewport, I'm going to see that I have a 3D ball lying on top of the grid right here. Okay. Now for this one, I'm going to create a giant plane. Whoop, a plane. And I do this because I want to be able to tell whether or not I'm on the grid. Okay. Visually, not mathematically. Mathematically, I could look up here and I'll notice that I'm at 0, right? I'm going to go ahead and freeze the transformations from this tool, modify freeze. And what I'm going to do is I want to get started. For my example here, this void is a little weird. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and assign the material, and I want to make a Lambert material, and I want it to look like a checkered board. So I'm going to go over here to the Lambert. I'm going to hit color, and I'm going to tell it to assign a checkered board so I could tell the difference. I could turn on my texture right here on the viewport. Somewhere on here it should turn on. Well, the texture isn't important, but oh, there it is. Okay, so there's my, so I could tell where the 3D space is at. All right, and then I'm gonna take off the lines on it because I don't like the lines. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start animating the ball. So remember that for the Macs, some of the Macs, if you're sitting in a different Mac, I need to have my mouse set up. I'm on a new Mac right here, so I don't have my mouse set up. So before I get started animating, I want to make sure that I go to my settings right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my mouse settings, make sure I have the third button on the middle and my secondary button on. So I'm going to go ahead and click exit. It's going to save those settings because I left it there. Notice how I could pan now, and that's going to help me animate later on. Okay, so I'm going to pay close attention down here. That's where I'm going to be hanging out for the majority of the time that we're here. And I'm going to use about 40 frames to do this. It could be more, but this is where we're gonna get started so I can see the individual frames at the bottom. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and save this channel. I'm gonna go right here to the side again, and I'm gonna save this right here, save, and then I'm gonna start animating. I like animating on even numbers, so I'm gonna go ahead and click start animating right here. I'm gonna squash down my ball, and then I'm gonna expand it so I can have relatively the same amount of mass that I started out with, right? And then I want it to leap forward. So notice how it's gaining momentum, and I want it to leap forward. So I'm going to change the rotation, the X rotation, to the direction that I kind of want to change the ball to propel the ball to, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and take a leap. I'm going to do it at frame 10, and I'm going to use my side view right here to do my leap. It's going to be somewhere up here, and I want my scales to be a clean ball up in the air, and I'm going to save this. I'm also going to change my rotation value to 0. That's going to help guide the ball later on. So I'm going to go ahead to like frame 14. We fall a little bit faster than we go up. So I'm going to go ahead and move that down over here. And I'm going to make sure that this is at 0. My translate wide is at 0. Surprisingly, I got that. Okay, I'm going to hit save because I want it to be there. So if I accidentally move my frame down here, I have somewhere to go. I want to change the trajectory from where the ball came from. So it's hitting that direction, and then I'm going to squash and stretch it. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch it like that, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to my 3D viewport, and I'm going to make sure that we're not creating mass. So I'm going to make it really skinny like that. Okay. Now if I go back over here, it's going to look really organic. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this viewport so I could preview it. And that's what we're doing. Squash, stretch, squash, stretch. And now we're going to take 2 frames, okay? I've seen some of y'all's animations where y'all have keyframes in every single frame right here. And it's going to, excuse me, it's going to affect the smoothness of your animation. So if you have red lines in every single frame, you're doing something wrong. You need to go back and you need to space it out. The rule of thumb is the less space between keyframes, the faster something moves. The more frames between keyframes, the slower something moves. Okay, so just a heads up on how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and give a really nice squish right here. I'm on frame 16. And these frames, there's no rules on how many frames it takes. It's more of a your preference type of thing. But what you don't want to do, the only rule that I would say that exists, is that you don't want to have a keyframe again on every frame, because that's going to affect the way your animation looks like. It's just going to look very poor, very just very jagged, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and move another 2 frames, and then I'm going to stretch it again. So I'm going to make it really skinny, and then I'm going to pull it on the y-axis, and I'm going to go a couple more frames. So how many frames did I do over here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to do it on 24, and I'm going to have it up in the air. I'm going to scale it to 1 again. And so basically what we're doing is rinse and repeat, right? We're just doing exactly what we did to the beginning part, and we're just going to continue on. So I'm going to do like about 4 frames over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring that back down. I'm not going to animate the third one. I'm just going to show y'all the first 2, and then y'all could do the third one on your own. On the translate Y, I want to make sure I'm at 0. I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe here, but then I want this to stretch out. So I'm going to stretch it out on the Y value, come back here on the F value. By the way, if you get lost in your animation viewport and you can't find where your animation's at or where your object is at, go ahead and press F, and that's going to put it on the screen so you guys can find your stuff, okay? So I'm going to make it skinny. I'm going to save that. So if you can watch it, boing. And then we want that impact to be really hard. So I'm going to go to like 2 frames over, and it's gonna squash down, and it's gonna spread like that, and then you're gonna continue on just like you did on the third one. Okay, so if we watch this, we're gonna press play. Some of y'all might be saying, hey sir, what happened? I'm getting something like this. Well, we have to go in and we have to tell the computer how to interpret this information. So before we can look at anything, we're gonna go to the bottom right corner with this little man that's running with the gear. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit, make sure our frame rate's 24 frames a second, and the playback speed is gonna be 24 frames a second times 1. We're gonna save that. We're gonna hit play. All right, so there's our 2 hops. We want a third hop, and on the third hop, y'all want to make sure that the third hop has um that stop, so it doesn't stop suddenly, but it wobbles in place. So I think I showed y'all how to do that. I'll do it at the end of the second hop so you guys can see more or less what we want to do. So I'm gonna save this every 4 frames real quick. So 4, and then 4, and then in between that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and make it stretch out. I'm going to make sure that this is not all squashed but stretched out like that. And then we're going to do it again right here on 36. And you could do it a couple more times. Like, it doesn't just have to be that. I mean, the more the merrier, right? I didn't save my keyframe here, so I have to redo this real quick. And you just want to add this subtleness, like stop, because it's got all this energy and it's like trying to get rid of it, right? We'll end 40 with a solid ball, so I'm gonna go to my scale. I'm gonna go to 1 right there, and I'm gonna click save on frame 40. Now we're gonna press play. Boing, boing. Y'all see that? How much more alive this looks, right? So the squash and stretch is gonna be very important, okay? Notice how many keyframes there are at the bottom. Notice how they're nice and spaced out. Again, the less keyframes they are in between, right? The slower it's gonna move, right? The closer together that they are, the faster it's gonna move, right? And some of those need to move kind of fast. You'll be surprised. You won't know how to do it until you kind of actually do it. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and play with it, have fun with it, and then just experiment, see what happens. That's why we're doing 3 different hops. Try a different hop every time you do it, okay? But get used to look like this translate Z right here. See how it progressively moves to the negative right here? So we start off at 0 at the beginning. Now look at the end and the translate Z in frame 40. We're at translate Z in negative 38, okay? That's not like something mathematically correct or anything. That's not a golden rule number, but that's just showing you that we're moving in 3D space, all right? Any questions or anything whatsoever? Okay, so at the end of today, before you guys walk out, be sure to turn in your notes. I'll have it graded and return to you tomorrow. And then this animation is going to be due tomorrow, the end of the day tomorrow. So be sure to start working at it right away. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. You could also post it on Google Classroom. I have a couple of days. I think I have gaming club one day on Wednesday. So if you need extra time to work on it, you can come in. Or sometimes if you ask me nicely, you can come in during lunch, right? All right, guys.